Welcome to the new podcast, A Mick, a Mook, and a Mike, hosted by four-time Emmy-nominated producer Frank Pace, with retired New York City firefighter and Vietnam vet Billy O'Connor.
My brother Frankie, how's it hanging, pal? How's everything? How's your waggle?
My waggle's fine, thank you. Talked about, but what the hell with all that? We got a guest today in studio.
In studio, right here.
We're very excited to have my good friend Stephen Peterman, who is the executive producer of Murphy Brown, executive producer of Suddenly Susan, executive producer of Miley Cyrus from Hannah Montana. Welcome, Hannah. The Stettel version.
Very sophisticated.
Welcome, Stephen.
Thank you.
Let me ask you a question before Billy takes over this entire conversation.
Okay.
You're the second week in a row we've had a Wisconsin native.
Who was the?
Lauren Sesselman, who was from Green Bay. And she was a soccer player on the Canadian National Olympic team.
Which explains why she and I didn't bump into each other.
Yes. And I wanted to ask you the same thing I asked her. What the hell's going on with Aaron Rodgers?
Boy, oh boy. I love Aaron, but Aaron is like a teenage girl in some ways. And here I am. All right, we're doing ESPN. We're doing hot takes. Some of Aaron's complaints are, I think, fully justified. If you look at some of the additions that they made and some of the trades they did and didn't do to build the team that he needed around in the last few years, you can understand why he'd be pretty upset about it. And I think Jordan Love last year was another, like, Jesus Christ. Thanks a lot for the vote of confidence. And then he has a season like I don't think anybody was expecting to have. Mm-hmm. And I just think they're a little tone deaf with him, and he requires a lot of care. A lot of care.
Wow. We've known actors like that.
But, you know, I do know actors like that, and they drive you crazy, but when they're really good, and they give you something nobody else does. And one of the reasons he's so good is because, like Brady, he came in with a chip on his shoulder, mm-hmm. you know. And I think he's had that chip on his shoulder his whole career, and it makes him as good as he is. So I don't know. I still think there's a real shot he'll play because he's
and play for the Packers.
And play for the Packers.
Because he's not writing out a $40 million check to sit out.
No, he's not. And it doesn't look like anybody's really rushing to go after him.
Right.
I'm hoping he plays, and it's not. But it's the same thing that happened with Favre. You don't want him to go out this way mm-hmm. after the career he's had. As a matter of fact, he was at Oakmont, the place I golf. He was at Oakmont 2 weeks ago. Mm-hmm. I got a text from one of my friends. Rodgers is here. Rodgers is here. You got to come over. And I'm like, what am I going to do? I'm going to come over to the club and
be a 7-year-old
and be a 7-year-old boy again. I can't do this. I can't do that. I'm not going to do it. I stay home. I'm really good. I do so. I vacuum the house for my wife.
But all the time you're thinking about Aaron Rodgers.
This is my maturity story. So I don't do anything. And it's like, and I get the call at like 10 in the morning. 2:30 in the afternoon, I'm done with everything. I said, I'm going to go over to the club and hit a little bit. He's probably gone by now.
Sure, you did.
I'll go down to the range.
Sure.
No, it was closer. It was like 3. I get down there. One of the bag boys says, he's in the card room. Are you going to go in the card room? Yeah, I'm going to walk into the card room like, oh, I'm sorry. I thought this was the bathroom. You know, it's like so stupid. I'm not going to go down to the card room. So what do? I say, I know what I'll do. I need to practice my putting. So, you know, the putting green is right where you cross out of the club to head to the parking lot. I'm going to putt. I wound up putting for an hour and a half because he spent a lot of time in that card room. But when he came out, he walked by me, and I said, "Hey, whatever happens, it's been great watching you play." And he said, Thanks, man. So I think I may have tipped him towards, God, Wisconsin people are so nice, I should stay.
Good. Because he doesn't have a future in television.
No.
Because he was awful.
I agree.
Hosting Jeopardy.
I agree.
He was the worst.
I agree. No, he's just stiff.
He was stiff.
And he was like trying really hard to be a good student.
Yeah.
You know.
I'm surprised that nobody really wants to go after him though, because he's still got a lot left. I mean, his
yeah, but the price tag. They'll go after him, okay, but the price tag.
Yeah.
Before I let Billy take over this.
So far, you're doing a good job.
Yeah. Is Kristen Yelich through? Kristen Yelich through?
To be honest with you, I left Wisconsin a long time ago. I was a Cubs fan for years because I grew up with the Braves when they were the Milwaukee Braves. Mm-hmm. When they left, my brother and I became Cubs fans because WGN blasted them. You could listen to them, mm-hmm. And we had no other options. Then the Brewers came in. They were an American League team. I didn't know the American League, so I stayed with the Cubs for years. Then I move out here, and I'm still a Cubs fan. But then my son is born, and I'm thinking, well, I started becoming a Dodgers fan mainly because I was listening to Vin Scully. Mm-hmm. And if you listen to Vin Scully, you become a Dodgers fan. Then my son is born, and I think, am I going to ruin my son's life by making him a Cubs fan?
Oh.
Or am I going to give him the shot at happiness by making him a Dodgers fan? So I gave my son free will, and he became a Dodgers fan. So I became a Dodgers fan. The Brewers, my mom loves the Brewers.
I know, your mom and your aunt.
My mom and my aunt. You have researched this.
No, I spent 30 years with you.
Yeah, that's true. You remember stuff. You remember a lot.
I do remember a lot.
For a guy who had some medical issues.
I do.
And emotional issues.
Emotional issues for sure.
But my mom taught me how to score a baseball game.
Yeah, and your mom's, your aunt's 100?
No, my aunt, that's right. Aunt Shirley is 101. Mom is 98.
And your aunt and your mom threw out the first ball?
Aunt Shirley threw out on her 100th birthday. Aunt Shirley threw out the first pitch at a Brewers game. And 20 of us got comped in for the Brewers game. And the crowd, and I know Milwaukee crowds, fortunately, they hadn't had enough time to drink too much. So they were actually polite to her.
That's a big beer town, ain't it, Milwaukee?
Oh, my God. I remember as a kid going to 10-cent beer night at Milwaukee County Stadium where you could watch marriages disintegrate over 6 innings. You'd start with a couple in love, excited to be at the game, and by the 7th inning, it was like, you fucking son of a bitch.
I remember driving to work in the South Bronx, and Yankee Stadium, this is years back, they had bat day. They used to give everybody a bat. When I'm driving to work, I see these gangs of kids, 30, 40 kids with bats, and I got the windows up, I'm locking the doors. I said, this can't be a good idea.
So let's get into show business.
Okay.
How do you get into show business? No, I'm kidding. What would you say, Stephen, would be the height of your illustrious career? And if you can't pick one or two.
The height of the illustrious career. I mean, listen, the Emmy run we had on Murphy was pretty amazing, but that was relatively early. I was really lucky. Gary, my writing partner, Gary Donzig, and we met as actors, and we started writing pretty late because both of us had careers as actors. So we didn't know what the odds were, which is really good, because if we had known the odds, we might not have been so blithe about going into it. But we got lucky. It was the right time, right place, and we got on Murphy pretty quick. And so that all happened.
And you got on Murphy as story editors, didn't you?
We were story editors.
Yes.
Yeah, we had the least experience, the least credit. So story editors.
What is a story editor?
Story editor basically is the lowest level. You write, if you're lucky, you will write a script, maybe two. But generally, you're not involved in the casting of your show. You're not involved in the editing of your show. You basically hand your script in and everybody else takes it from there.
So you're an entry-level writer, pretty much?
We were entry-level. I mean, yeah, we had written we had been on a couple little cable shows and stuff like that, but we had very few credits.
And I didn't realize that you were at that level until I started doing research for this. Yeah. It's amazing that within 4 years, and Derek's got a picture of the Murphy Brown writing staff. The Murphy Brown writing staff was truly a hall of fame of writers.
It was a great.
It was a great group, and you rose to be an executive producer within 4 years.
Meteoric.
Well, meteoric. I thought you were going to say mediocre. I was going to correct you immediately, but
I'm a very fine B-level writer.
no, that's the cast of Murphy Brown. That's not the writing staff of Murphy Brown.
No, we don't look that.
But
good.
look, we can talk about that. Look about the cast. Derek, you thought that was the writing staff.
Yeah, that'll be the.
Which one is you?
Who else do you think? Miles Silverberg.
Nope, that's not the writing staff either. But
Jesus
that's not
Christ!
the writing staff either.
Wow, you found some greats.
Well, let's just go through this.
Oh my God!
That's Joni Loves Chachi. That's you as an actor.
That's me as an actor. I did one episode of Happy Days where
it was Happy Days.
Yeah, it was Happy Days, it was Happy Days, and I played basically an amusing version of date rape. You couldn't do this now. But I'm basically like chasing her around the couch trying to comically rape her. Because look at me. I'm a child. I'm wearing a Madras shirt. Anyway, God, I remember that episode. And I've forgotten some of I did so many little guest shots. I've forgotten some of them.
Yeah, let's go back to the Bill Murray shot.
Oh Jesus!
See if we can go backwards. Yeah, there's you and Bill Murray. That's
on Square Pegs,
right?
And I had worked with Bill before. I had done a little bit in the movie Where the Buffalo Roam, where he played a character modeled on Hunter Thompson, and it was basically an improv scene. He was in a courtroom where his friend was defending someone on a marijuana bust, and Bill had a flask of tequila that he was drinking from, and I was a Berkeley law student observing the courtroom, and over the course of the 2 days, Bill gets me bombed on the tequila, and that was a blast because I'm improvising with Bill Murray, and just basically going wherever he goes. Then Bill comes on Square Pegs because Ann Beats had been one of the writers on Saturday Night Live.
Ann Beats recently passed away.
I know.
Sad.
A bunch of us have been online. This was an amazing cast too. But Bill does this as a favor for her, and Bill plays a substitute teacher who I'm very jealous of. But there's a scene in which I have written dialogue. Bill ostensibly has written dialogue, but Bill's improvising all over the place, and I'm clinging to the script like a life, like it's Jack and Rose on the Titanic, and I'm trying to stay with him. It was really tough, but I mean, I he's an amazing actor.
So let's see if we can get to the Murphy Brown writing staff.
He's a big Cub fan too, isn't he, Bill Murray?
Huge Cub fan. And a huge golf fan.
Yes, he is. He's both of those.
See, there, I was kind of cute there.
Yeah, we'll just keep talking.
I have no chin, but I'm cute. Enough.
Great. So that Emmy run?
Yeah, the Emmy run. But I would say that for sheer impact, Hannah Montana was just extraordinary. Hannah Montana became
cultural phenomenon.
A cultural phenomena, and in some ways the most. It was hard because of the stress involved with doing a kids show. Michael Porteous and I, who ran the show together, we made a wonderful writing partnership, but each of us had a personality where we banged heads a lot. And so there was a lot of each of us dealing with the other's personal idiosyncrasies, plus the cast, plus Miley becoming enormous, plus Disney trying to milk that cow for as much as they could, us trying to protect Miley. But man, every Friday night was like a Beatles concert.
Yeah.
Derek,
do you have a picture of Steve with Miley Cyrus? Now, of course, that's Derek Harris, the third man in the booth. His cultural bias may not let him know who Miley Cyrus is, so he may not recognize him. But
except for I have a daughter.
Stephen, your writing partner on Hannah Montana was who?
Michael Porteous.
So Michael and you kind of clashed. Did you find that better or worse than when you and Gary were writing together?
Oh no, Gary's
the nicest man in the whole world.
Gary's the nicest man in show business, and
no, in the whole world.
Well, I call him the hardest working saint in show business.
Yep.
Gary's wonderful and lets me win most of the arguments.
Do you think you get better writing out of somebody
No,
who's adverse? Or
no.
somebody who's...
I think it's you get the writing you're going to get. It's just you get a lot of battles with each other, and it was a lot of. Some of it was my fault. Some of it was Michael's fault. But
Most of it was Michael's fault.
well, that's for others to say.
Well, consider me another. There's a picture of Stephen with.
Yeah. I mean, when I met Miley, she was 13 years old. She was shorter, she came up to my neck. And now she's taller than I am. But when she came into audition, she had that husky Southern twang, and she sang. Even at 13, she had what you call chest tones.
Mm-hmm.
She had resonance. She had power at 13 years old, and she had a fearlessness that when you watched her audition, she was all over the place. She would hit some jokes in an unexpected way that was hysterical. She would miss some jokes by a mile. But there was something about her that we just, a lot of people think the show was written for her. She was, in fact, the last person we thought was going to get it. But we kept bringing her back because there was something there that was just so visceral, so alive, that I said, we finally came down to Miley and one other girl, very talented young actress, much more experienced than Miley. She had been the child lead on a show with Jason Alexander. They did these two scenes. The other girl hit every joke, really solid, really pro. Miley, again, hitting some, missing others. But when we were all done, Gary Marsh, head of Disney, said, okay, what do we all think? And I said, the other girl's definitely more polished, more pro. And the more I watch her, the more bored I get.
Yeah.
That's remarkable.
I know exactly what she's going to do before she does it, and then she does it, and it's fine. I can't take my eyes off Miley. Yeah. I don't know what the hell she's going to do next. But when she hits it out of the park, and I'm just watching her. Yeah. I can't take my eyes off.
Let me ask you something.
Well, hang on a second. Go ahead. When I worked with Howard Morris
in
the 50s, but in the 80s and 90s, Howard said she had this.
Yeah.
Yeah. Whatever. When an actor has this.
Yes.
Miley had this.
And she could sing. I love her voice. There are people who like it. There are people who don't. Her voice, it breaks my heart. When she's performing, when she's singing on stage, again, she's got that thing. She would rather die than this is the thing she was born to do.
Yep.
There's a great video of Miley when she was 3. I don't know. She's in the barn at their farm in Tennessee, and she's going to jump from this area onto some hay or something. And you hear Billy off camera say, careful, be careful, honey. And she says at 3, I'm not afraid of anything. And she jumps.
Wow. That's amazing.
And that's her.
Now, as an executive producer, correct me when I'm probably wrong, but you're a writer as well as do you decide who's going to be doing the casting?
Frank knows. One of the reasons
we've been over this. Maybe this
and
is
he just I know it goes over Billy's head.
Episode. He's asked me this question 45 times.
But I know he's the head writer. But I'm going to ask you the question.
Yeah. Okay.
I just asked the question.
You haven't asked him this question before, though.
Exactly.
If you ask writers, what kind of lifestyle they would prefer, most writers would say screenwriter, because you can work in your pajamas. You can work. You have a saner life. When you're a television writer, we all talk about Carl Reiner writing the first 39 episodes of the Dick Van Dyke Show. It's like, Jesus Christ, how did he do it? You're on that treadmill every week. When you're doing a 24, 26 episode season, 28 when they get really big, you're dying. I mean, by Christmas, you're begging for 3 days off. By March,
you're begging for hiatuses.
They're paying. Yeah. You're exhausted all the time. You don't see your family. When you see your family, your mind is on what this week's script is okay, but what about next week? And we don't really have a story for the week after next. And can we get this guest star? All of that. But what you do have when you're the executive producer is as much control as anybody short of a Scorsese has. You're the last voice, you're the last pencil, you're the last computer keystroke to touch a script. You're the one who argues with the network. And the more successful you are, the more often you get to win. You're the one who, again, fights with the network, but can win on casting. You're in the editing room with the editor making the final cuts. You sacrifice lifestyle for control.
And Stephen was a good one too, because I often say that again parrot Howard Morris, but who always said a camel is a horse built by committee. And more shows have died because executive producers aren't willing to make that stand,
right?
And to have a single voice. And ultimately, Stephen and Gary had a really strong voice, and that's what made the show successful.
But there's so much,
and you learned from Diane, of course.
That's what I was going to say.
Who had the strongest voice in the history of television.
The first 2 years of Murphy Brown, I watched Diane. I've never seen anybody better.
This is Diane English.
Diane English. I've never seen anybody better at handling all of it. She could write. We used to joke. Her office was on the way into the writer's room. All our offices at Warner Brothers were upstairs.
By the way, I might add, their offices were in James Dean's apartment,
right,
when he was working at Warner Brothers.
Right.
Because Jack Warner wanted to know where and when James Dean was at all times.
Right.
So Jack Warner's office overlooked, which was at that time the pharmacy building,
right,
at Warner Brothers, and he had James Dean in the apartment upstairs for the pharmacy.
Yeah. Rebel without a cause, huh?
Yeah. So we would walk past Diane's room when we were heading into the writer's room to work, and she'd usually have her door open, and she'd be typing, working on a script, and she'd be sitting there at the typewriter with her fingers moving like Stephen Cannell. Remember Stephen?
Yeah,
Stephen Cannell?
Yeah.
At the end of the show, he'd have this thing where he'd typing, and then the page flips off, and her fingers would be moving so fast. I'd say to Gary, "She's not writing a fucking script. she's just trying to drive us insane." But she was such a good writer, and she also had the secret weapon of Corby Siamis, who was her right hand person, and the two of them together were like one wonderful brain. But Diane knew how to handle the writing staff, knew how to handle the actors, knew how to handle the network, knew how to. She and Candace bonded because when they first met each other, they were both wearing Chanel. I mean, she just knew how to handle everything. And when we took over the show from Diane, we realized it took us a year to learn it. She had protected us all from so much because she was handling so much, that I got into the executive producing after Diane left. Gary and I took over the show.
In year 4, right?
In fifth year. Fourth year ended with the birth of the baby.
Right.
And that was Diane's 100th episode. Diane had protected us all. I thought the job of an executive producer is to just give the cast the best scripts you possibly can. What I didn't realize is the job of an executive producer is to
shield him,
check in with the star. How you doing? Everything okay? Anything going on that we need to talk about? I didn't realize that that's as much a part of the job as the scripts.
And on a lot of shows that I was on, I fulfilled that.
Yes,
show
you did.
Because a lot of the executive producers didn't have the stomach to talk to the stars.
Right.
So I would be the the voice of the executive producer when they wanted me to or chose me to.
I didn't realize. It took me a long time. And I spent a lot of time on Hannah, dealing with Miley, dealing with Billy. Billy was an interesting case because, again, the stories are now different after the fact. But the truth of the matter is, Miley was the last person who was going to get that job. And it came down to that final day. And I said what I said, and Lee Shalachemel, who was directing the pilot, jumped in and agreed with me. Gary agreed with me, and Gary Marsh also ultimately said, "Okay, let's go with her." Because Gary, to his credit, he said, "I want somebody who can really sing. I don't want someone that we have to produce." And so we went with Miley. Billy had stayed out of the whole process while Miley was doing it. He stayed in the back like a proud, nervous dad. But once Miley got the job, he said, "Do you guys mind if I audition to play the dad?" And he had already done Doc up in Canada, which was a mild little thing about a country doctor falls in love with a woman from the big city and moves to the big city. He hadn't a lot of experience, and Billy will tell you he's not really an actor. And we thought, sure, of course you can audition. It'll be cute. We'll let him audition. He's not going to get it because we thought Miley is so inexperienced. We're going to need to surround her with as much experience as possible. And we had one guy who we thought was going to get it. And Billy, when he came into the room to read with her, said, "You should probably hire that guy. He's really funny."
Billy Ray Cyrus guy.
Yeah, Billy. But then he sits down with Miley to do the scene. And the love and connection between those two was so palpable and so wonderful to watch. Her comfort level with him, the physicality, the teasing, the touching, the poking. It was like,
it was real.
You can't create that. Or if you're lucky, maybe in year 2 or 3 you get it. These two have it from the beginning. It's going to be a great story to have Billy Ray Cyrus and his daughter playing playing father and daughter on the show. And because Billy wasn't an actor, he didn't fall into the normal sitcom rhythms that an actor might. Everybody else on the show, the kids, because of their natural proclivity and because the show is a Disney kids show, we always had to make sure they didn't fly too high above the floor. But there was a lot of fast. Billy couldn't go fast. So when Billy talked, everything slowed down a little bit. And frankly, it was a relief. It was a nice little change of tone. And we had to convince him. At a certain point, it became almost like A Star is Born. He's like, "What am I doing here? She's the star. You don't need me. I'm a joke." And we said to him, and we meant it. He said, that father-daughter relationship is the heart of this show. There are kids all over America who think you're the cool, funny dad they wish they had. The show isn't the show without you. And we meant it, and I meant it. But we had to spend a lot of time making Billy feel okay as Miley's career ascended.
And you probably, we had a guest a couple of weeks ago named Bubba Gilliam, and Bubba was Lyle in Blazing Saddles, who started the fart scene around the fire, and he was a fireman in Dallas when Mel Brooks called him and said, "Will you come do this movie?" And he said, "I never acted before." So he turned him down like 3 times. And the key to him was they had to tell him, "Do not try to act. Yeah. You're perfect the way you are."
Yeah. And that's a hard thing to do.
And it sounds like Billy Ray was the same way.
Billy, yeah. The more relaxed it was, the more fun it was. And we learned how to write. We like to think we learned how to write for all of them. Again, a lot of the things that came, the show wasn't originally written for particularly a Southern family, but we built in the fact that Billy had been a country music star. We used a lot of the real stuff, and we used certain expressions that they used. And then there were other expressions. I'm very proud of the fact I invented the phrase "sweet niblets," because, as you pointed out before, I come from Wisconsin, and there's a lot of corn.
A lot of corn.
A lot of corn. Truth is always better than fiction, I guess.
And then by having Miley, you were also able to have her godmother.
Yeah,
Dolly Parton.
That was I got Billy and Miley both said Dolly is willing to do the show. And obviously, like everybody else, I was a huge fan of Dolly Parton's. So we came up with an idea, and I had to call Dolly to run the idea by her because she wanted to make sure this is
On brand.
On brand, comfortable with my image and who I like to project myself to be and who I really am. So we told her the story, and it was a very sweet story, and she was going to be playing the godmother, which she really is. So I tell her the story. She says, "Great, sounds great. I love it. I'll do it." And I said, "Okay, Dolly, we're thrilled. We can't wait to see you. What is there anything you need?" And she said, "Darling, all I need is a turlet and a place to hang my wig."
That's terrific.
That's perfect.
That's down earth, huh?
And man, when she got there, I mean, the crew loved her, the cast loved her. Miley and Billy were thrilled. When she came out for her first scene, dressed, the episode was about getting a hold of a videotape that had accidentally, their friend had accidentally shot, and if it got in the wrong hands, it would reveal her secret identity. And it was in the school newspaper video thing. So they had to break into the school at night to get this thing back. So they were doing a Mission Impossible thing with Dolly, and she was all dressed in like a black cat suit kind of thing, very form-fitting. And the Disney execs looked at Dolly, who is an architectural wonder, and they were like, "Jesus Christ, this is the Disney Channel. This is like three-dimensional. It's too much." And I said, "What do you, it's Dolly Parton." They said, "You got to talk to her about maybe changing the clothes." And so I went up to Dolly, executive producer style.
Yeah.
I said, "Dolly, I want you to understand I'm here as a messenger only. There are some people over there who think your outfit may be a little exuberant. I personally have no problem with it." And she said, "Well, then, if you don't have a problem with it, you can tell them that when you get Dolly, you get the whole package."
That's great.
And
That's some package. She'll never drown, that's for
and
sure.
what was fabulous was, she was wonderful. And we wound up having her on, I think, 3 times. I got to stand during breaks on the set and listen to her and Miley harmonize with Billy playing guitar. And those two voices together were fabulous. And for Dolly, she got a whole new audience. She got kids who didn't know her at all, who became huge fans of hers. Same thing happened with Vicki Lawrence, who came on as Billy's mom.
Mm-hmm.
Vicki Lawrence, when she first came on, the show was a little like, I'm not sure what I got.
Vicki Lawrence from the Carol Burnett Show.
From the Carol Burnett Show. Vicki was, I'm not sure exactly what I got myself into, but she was fabulous with the kids. I remember her saying to Miley and to Emily Osment, who played her best friend, "You got to learn to love your props. Use your props. Your props are your friends." Jason Earls, who played the brother, he knew it. And he instinctively knew it because Jason was the most experienced actor in the cast. But she was great with the kids. She got a whole new audience out of it. Mm-hmm. And the second and third time she came back to the show, she was like old home week.
Yeah.
There were so many wonderful moments on that show. We would shoot part of the show on Thursday because we had, in every episode, she was Miley some of the time and Hannah some of the time. So we'd shoot all Hannah stuff on Thursday or all Miley stuff on Thursday, depending on how the script worked out. And then our editor would do a rough cut of it and show it to the audience on the monitors. Well, before every show, when you load the audience in, we would show a previous episode while everything was getting ready, so the audience had something to look at. And if you had a guest star or something that was coming back, you'd show an episode where that person had been on the show just to remind the audience who it was. I would come down to the set before the show and say hi to the camera crew and check out how everything was going, how everybody was doing. And I would walk and look up at the audience, and I would see all these kids watching the playback of a previous episode on the monitors. And oftentimes I would see kids mouthing the words, the dialogue of the show, because they had watched the show so many times, they'd memorized it.
Yeah, we had that on Shake It Up with Zendaya and Bella Thorne, and we had that on Girl Meets World also. The kids were phenomenal.
When you're doing an adult show, even on Murphy, I mean, Murphy had some real impact episodes. But oftentimes, like on Suddenly Susan, you do an episode, you work really hard, you do the best you can, you're proud of it. Sometimes you're less proud, but other times you really think we did a great job. Most of the time, what you hear once it's on the air is, I saw the show last night. It was cute. It was really cute.
Yeah. I'll tell you one thing.
That's the best you get.
Yeah, I saw. We did 114 episodes of Head of the Class from 1986 to 1991. And I did all of them. I was watching an episode last night or last week on HBO Max, and I said, "Was I there?"
Yeah.
Well, I mean, because
I forget.
Yeah, you forget, and I was actually drawn into the story. I wanted to see what happened.
Wow, that's really amazing.
That's the great thing about having strokes. And so get to live it all. So Corby Shyammas has an encyclopedic memory of episodes, who wrote what joke. I remember maybe 4 jokes I wrote on Murphy Brown. Now, some of the writers will tell you, well, that's because you only got 4 in. But that's not true. But it's amazing how, I remember song lyrics from when I was 6 years old.
Of course.
But I can't remember jokes
What
that I
happened
wrote.
yesterday, yeah.
And the same, and the same thing. But with Hannah Montana and kid shows, because you know this from Disney, a kid audience is not only, they're unbelievably loyal, they're passionate about it. And we would get parents saying to us, thank you for doing a show that we can watch as a family. We're at a point now, we all grew up with maybe 2 TVs in the house. There's one in the kitchen, maybe there was one in the living room. Now everybody has their own viewing device. Everybody goes off and watches their own stuff. But we always threw in jokes for the adults on Hannah, jokes that we knew the kids might not get this, but their parents will get it. And if the parents are laughing at something, maybe the kid will say, why are you laughing? What is that? Why is that funny? And it's a conversation.
Right.
And the parents would say, we can watch this show with our kids. And sometimes you're dealing with bullies, or sometimes you're dealing with lying to your parents and whatever, being a good friend. They're good episodes, but they're not treacly. It's something that we watch together, that we can talk about. We can have that was wonderful.
Yeah.
How difficult it is for you to write for 12, 13-year-old girls. I mean, some of your shows, State of Grace and Hannah Montana. How do you do that? I mean, like, you write what you know. So how do you be like J.D. Salinger to be able to go back in time?
He challenged his inner self.
I do. First of all,
he's a 12-year-old girl at heart.
You talk about thinking I still look like I'm 20. I still remember embarrassing things from high school. I still remember embarrassing things from grade school. I'm convinced that the kids go through the same emotions adults go through. Adults just have more sophisticated names for what they're going through and more sophisticated ways of trying to deal with it. But it's the same. You want to be liked. You want to be considered smart. You want someone to like you. You want
over 3. We're both over 3.
I've never had a problem. I've never had a problem writing it because it's all emotion. The only thing a kid has is they're less guarded about it. And they're less able at times to understand what it is. So I can write about it because I understand it. Yeah, go ahead.
When did you and Gary come to the realization of that? Because you know it now, but you didn't know it then. And
because Gary and I came out of acting, I think we were used to playing roles. And as a matter of fact, everybody's got their own different way of writing. Gary and I, our writing method is, we were 2 actors we met doing a play in San Diego at the Old Globe. We sat next to each other and improvised. We'd work on, obviously, the structure, but then we'd sit at the typewriter, and we became, what I loved about writing, I missed acting when we started. But what I discovered I loved about writing is I can play Eldon Bernanke. I'm never going to play Eldon Bernanke, but I can write him, and I can be him when I'm writing him, and I can be Miles Silverberg.
Right.
And Murphy, we always, Diane always said, Murphy is Mike Wallace in a dress. That was her famous quote.
Wow. Right.
So Murphy, it's funny, when we first started writing the show, when we were on the show, the first 4 or 5 episodes, I remember saying to Gary, how the hell are we going to do 24 of these? She's rich. She's beautiful. She's respected. She's got a great job. What the hell are the problems? And then we realize it's all ego.
Mm-hmm.
It's all ego and insecurity.
Mm-hmm.
And so Gary and I never had a problem writing character because we had played characters and we loved losing ourselves in character.
That's remarkable to me.
Yeah.
Now, when you did Murphy Brown, obviously she was a journalist, and then when you did Suddenly Susan, she was putting out a magazine.
Yeah.
Is your background in journalism Harvard? Did you have any kind of writing background at Harvard? Harvard.
I always liked writing. I was afraid of it. I mean, it's hard to do. Acting is, well, they always say in acting, getting the job is hell, but once you get it, it's great. In writing, during the period that we were working, getting the job was easy, and once you got it, it was hell. I found I love good writing. I read like a maniac. I still read. I read books. I have books open all over the house, and I read good stuff. I can't read pot boilers. I need language.
It's not how much you read; it's what you read.
I need people who know how to use the English language,
like we didn't. If These Lips Could Talk.
Exactly.
And our latest book, Lamar's Gamble. And then our third book is coming out, Combustible.
I can't wait.
Good.
But I loved it. But I found I would do everything except write when I was writing alone. I would vacuum the house. I would do laundry. I would iron. I would practice my putting. I needed someone, and that probably comes out of my acting background. I needed someone to bounce off of. And Gary and I discovered we were just similar enough and different enough to make a good writing team.
Right.
You know, there's an old adage that says if you and your partner agree on everything, one of you is unnecessary.
It's exactly right. I tried to write with a best buddy from college, and we had this exact same sense of humor, and so we got stuck at the same places. Gary and I were different enough that he brought things to the partnership I could never supply, and I did the same for him.
Gary's a unique guy. Why don't you tell us a little bit about Gary?
All right. Gary Danzig. Gary is an incredibly spiritual, nurturing soul. Gary grew up gay and fighting it in Long Island with a father who he and I are now convinced was probably repressed homosexual.
Mm-hmm.
His father didn't like them to go to the movies because he didn't like them sitting in seats that other people had sat in. His father was incapable of going to the bathroom at somebody else's house.
One of these guys that gets out of the shower to piss.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or out of the
pool. A true gentleman.
Gary had gone to school in Washington, D.C., and then moved to New York to be an actor, and started working in New York theater. He was adopted a little bit by the Andy Warhol crowd early on. He was, as we often say, he was a beautiful young man. As our partnership developed, it was like, yeah, he's Alan Alda and I'm Radar. I was always envious because Gary was very good looking and still has great cheekbones to this day. But Gary was adopted by the Andy Warhol crowd. That's Gary. That's Marcia Mason. Marcia Mason. Marcia Mason.
The Good Biker.
That's also Tom Seeley.
And Tom Seeley, one of our other writers. Marcia was married to her first husband, an actor and a painter named Gary Campbell. And Gary Campbell and Gary Danzig and Marcia all lived in the same building in New York. Gary Campbell realized that he was gay. He divorced Marcia, and he and Gary became a couple. Gary and Gary. They were called the Garys. They became a couple and remained in like a French film with Marcia for the rest of Gary Campbell's life. The three of them were like brothers and sister. When she was with Neil Simon, they were often at the house for various things. When Neil and Marcia broke up, Neil was the more powerful one in the couple, so most of the friends went with Neil, and Marcia found herself somewhat abandoned, not by Gary and Gary. They remained very tight to the point where Marcia would sometimes come over and sleep in the bed with the three of them would sleep in the bed together. And ultimately, Marcia bought 50 acres in Abiquiu, New Mexico, which is where Georgia O'Keeffe, the painter, lived, and sold 5 or 10 acres to Gary and Gary, and they built a house in Abiquiu.
Wow.
So they were like across the courtyard from each other.
And I think that Gary also has got a pretty good relationship with Shirley MacLaine, who he squires around town. He's a male escort.
Gary Campbell died of a massive heart attack while Gary and I were here in LA, and it was devastating because they were together for 37 years. And when Gary and I started writing together, it was like 1985, 86. It was just the beginning of the AIDS epidemic.
Yeah.
And nobody knew exactly how you got it, who was likely to get it. Could you have it for years and it was incubating and you didn't know? They had already been basically a monogamous couple for a while, but they didn't know. And on our very first show, Danzig would go to the hospital to visit friends who were dying before work, come in, we would write comedy. Then at lunchtime, sometimes he would go over and visit somebody in a nearby hospital, come back, sit on the couch, cry for 10 minutes, and then we'd write comedy.
Yeah.
And it got him through, and we were able to compartmentalize. But I remember those days with the two of them seeing friend after friend going and not knowing whether it might happen to them. Campbell finally died of this massive coronary. And eventually Gary couldn't stay in the Abiquiu house anymore. The memories were too tough. So he sold it back to Marcia and moved to Santa Fe, where he lives now. And we've been writing over Zoom. But Gary has become the dinner date of choice
For Shirley MacLaine.
for widows, divorcees, Shirley MacLaine. He and Ally McGraw have become very dear friends in the last couple of years. And he says to me, he said, Ally is one of the most beautiful human beings, spiritually, everything. He said, I would almost go straight for Ally McGraw.
Wow.
High praise.
Steve McQueen and Gary Danzig.
Steve McQueen, Gary Danzig, and Bob Evans.
And Bob Evans.
Bob Evans, yeah, Robert Evans.
Wow.
Yeah. But Gary, and the other thing, and Gary and I have talked about it a lot. You were complimentary before about the way Gary and I ran shows. Gary was always, we were both incredibly, we tried to be very, we knew all the crew, we knew all the names, we let people know how much we appreciated the work they were doing, not just because that's how we were brought up, but because if your crew knows that you're aware of the extra effort they make and you appreciate it, they're going to do it for you.
Yep.
So Gary was always really sweet about that. I tended to be the one who was always terrified that, we're going to get found out. We're faking it. We've been faking it and faking it. This is the script where everybody finds out. And Gary was always like, we figured it out before. We'll figure it out again. And I was like, no, don't you understand?
We're imposters.
Because we figured it out before so many times, there's even more likelihood that this is the time we don't figure it out.
You started as an actor. When did you know that you could write? When did it dawn on you?
Not until Gary and I sat down together the first day and came up with an idea. And then we started writing it, and we thought it was funny. And then friends of ours read it and said, this is pretty good. But I still find the process fascinating and mysterious. The one thing I have said to people is that, I was about to say before, I was the one who had all the fear and insecurity. I wouldn't take it out on the crew I wouldn't take it out on the actors. I wouldn't take it out on the writers because I wanted to be a nice guy. I wouldn't take it out on my wife, Susan, because Frank knows her. My wife is small, but she's Irish. And
she's feisty, and you wouldn't stand a chance.
I wouldn't stand a chance. And she would kick me out on my ass.
By the way, I've got the same wife.
Yeah, I know. And I took it out on Gary. I would be, because I was scared every week, I could be abusive towards him. Or I would just vent about, oh my God.
Not really abusive. That's not.
Just terrible.
Yeah.
I was just, this script, this sucks. We suck. This is awful. And he would have to be the one calming me. So it took me a long time to realize you waste so much time being afraid. It's useless.
Mm-hmm.
And after 30 years of doing it, you suddenly realize, okay, I've been doing this for 30 years.
I got to be good.
I'm good.
Yes.
I may not be as good as I want to be. I know I'm not as good as some of the writers I admire, but I'm good. And I can get a script to a certain place. And then I've got a wonderful writing staff with me. They'll make it better.
Mm-hmm.
It took me a long time to get to that. And now, what was wonderful about doing the Murphy Brown reboot in New York was Gary and I were able to work together in a way that, like when we first started.
And you both got separate paychecks instead of having to split a paycheck.
That's right.
Because as writers, as a writing team,
right.
As a writing entity, they pay the entity. So if you're getting X amount of dollars, each person's getting 1/2 X.
Right.
Whereas now, when we were back in Murphy, we both got X.
Yeah, we both got X.
But you had to check your ego at the door. I mean, when you're writing with a partner, you got to realize that it's going to be better. He's going to make it better. The more eyes on it, it's going to make it better.
Absolutely. But one of the reasons that our partnership works as well as it does is Gary lets me win most of the arguments.
Uh-huh.
And I have also learned that when Gary digs in his heels, he's usually right.
His instinct.
But most of the time, he will say, "Okay, all right, yeah."
Now, when you're an executive producer, your instinct comes involved in that too. I mean, like you said, with Miley Cyrus, you knew she was the right one. You didn't know why, but you knew she was the right one.
Yeah.
So it's
well, of course, all you've got. I mean, writers. We've always said writers are the ones who were the loudest ones at their dinner table, but we all think we're funny. And what's wonderful about writing, I missed acting for a while. Every once in a while, I'll go see somebody in a play, and I'll miss it all over again. And I still think maybe I'll do a play sometime. It'd be fun. But what I loved about writing is you come up with a line, and you really think it's funny, and then you get an actor like Grant Shod, because Grant was. I had gone up for
Grant Shod played Miles Silverberg.
He played Miles
Brown.
Silverberg. Grant, there's a shot of us in a book that was written called Anatomy of a Sitcom about Murphy, where Grant and I are next to each other in almost identical wardrobe. Grant, that was the kind of role I used to get. Although Grant, I think, was far superior to what I ever would have done with it. But you get an actor like Grant Shod reading your material. You get an actor like Charlie Kimbrough, or Candace, or any of these guys, or Joe Regalbuto reading your stuff, and they make it even better than what you heard in your head. But you know when you write it, that's a funny line, and then it gets that laugh. And sometimes you write a line that you think is okay, and that line gets a huge laugh.
Yeah.
And then there are times when you write one you think this is killer, and it dies. But most of the time, if you're a successful writer, if you think it's funny, it's funny.
Now, when you write that line, do you write it with Joe Regalbuto in mind? You do. So you're in character when you're
That's again, something that comes, I think, out of being an actor, having a background as an actor.
But also after hearing...
You hear their voices in your head.
And it really takes a little while before you hear their voices, maybe a half a season or 12 episodes before you can actually write for the
I still
characters.
remember the first big laugh, and I told you, I don't remember a lot. The first big laugh I got Charlie Kimbrough, because I heard Charlie's voice, and he was reminiscing as his character, and the line was, "It was cold at the Yalu River, damn cold," and I just knew when I came up with it, Charlie will kill with that line. And when you get an actor, when you get characters that are written as well as Diane wrote them, and you get actors like that playing it, Charlie Kimbrough, the audience would start laughing before he'd say the line.
Right.
They'd start laughing as he sort of planted himself like a duck in a nest about to say the line. And it's wonderful to hear really good actors take your stuff and make it better.
Well, you and Gary Danzig won an Emmy for Jingle Hell.
Yeah.
Was that the Dreidel show, or was that another show?
The Dreidel might have been in it. But you were saying before the best stuff comes out of life. We had a thing on, like most shows, you're up, you're running, everybody's doing great. Christmas is coming. Everybody has to buy Christmas presents for everybody. It's like, fuck. I don't have time for this. And who needs another paperweight? Who needs another little golf ball with a clock in it? It's like, what the hell are we doing? And so we all ran around the first year doing that on Murphy, and it was a pain in the ass. And second year, Christmas is coming, and Gary Danzig, the hardest working saint in show business, says, look, we're all doing so much better than we ever thought we would do. Why don't we, instead of buying stupid presents for each other, why don't we pick like 3 charities, and everybody gives to the charity? And nobody has to buy presents, and everybody's like,
By the way, that was the
home run.
That was the crew's most hated gift.
yeah, yeah,
because the crews wanted trinkets, and the greatest crew gift ever was Reinhold Wiggy on Night Court gave every member of the crew $500.
Well, you can give the crew stuff. That's okay. But and those are those are the crew jackets or whatever. Yeah. But everybody said, oh, my God, Gary, that's a great idea. We'll give to charity, and now we don't have to run around and buy stuff. Everybody's happy with it. And then Barnett Kellman, our Jewish director, sees Candace sneaking into her trailer with bags. Yeah. And then she sees her makeup artist and her hairstylist come out with the bags. And Barnett goes into her trailer. What the hell did you do? You gave them presents.
Couldn't resist.
You gave them presents. And she said, I had to. And he says, how's it going to make me look? The Jewish director. It was a real life situation. And Gary and I created an episode about that, where everybody makes the agreement. We won't buy presents. We'll give to charity. And Murphy couldn't resist buying for a couple of people, and you wind up we created the Dana Drug on the corner on Christmas Eve, buying whatever's left, and we had Corky finding Charlie there with a mouse cookie jar. It was actually it looked too good, so we had the set decorators or prop guy spray it gray so that it kind of looked like a rat. And he's holding it, and she discovers him, and well, this is for you. And she says, "This is what you think of me, a rodent cookie jar." And I have that rodent cookie jar in my office at home. But we went to the drugstore over on Pass Avenue,
right,
and just wandered around looking at the crap that's on the shelf that you would buy at the last minute, and we had Corky buying, I think, for Charlie, this Yadro kind of plaster thing, and it was called Two Country Boys Peeing in a Pond.
You can't cut deals for Christmas. My daughter's always saying, what do my grandchildren want for Christmas? Just get them 2 gifts, And then of course I show up with the 2 gifts. And my ex-wife shows up with like 30 things, and I look like a mutt. It's like
at a certain point, yeah.
That's the way
you
they
got to
operate.
know what's happening.
Yeah, that's the way they happen. I got to ask you about your Twitter handle. I got Crafty Lefty.
Oh yeah.
05. What's that all about? Is it because you're lefty political, or you're a left-hander? Or
I'm left-handed and I'm a lefty political.
And 05?
I can't remember. It must have been when I started Twitter. It must have been when I started Twitter.
Yeah.
In 05.
And then I was in your Twitter account because I was reading a lot of your son's blogs, and they're really good. He can write. Any background there? Did he have any training, or he just writes?
Here's what happened.
Genetic?
With my kid. First of all, he grew up on sets. He did a couple of little parts on Suddenly Susan, little bits. never wanted to be an actor, which I was thrilled with. And there was one moment, he and Emily Osment were actually in the same class at Flintridge Prep in 7th grade when Emily auditioned for us. And I loved her audition. I came home that night and I said, we had somebody, do you know Emily? And she, oh yeah, she's in my class. What's she like? Oh, she's great. She's great. I remember she gave a great reading, but she stood there with her arms at her side and this kind of poker face. And I thought, I don't know if she really wants to be here or not, but she's giving a really great reading. And a couple days later, I was over at the school to watch him in a softball game. And Emily came running by. She was chasing some other boy. She was going to pound him. And I said, you gave a really good audition. She said, oh, thanks. And she ran chasing the boy. And I thought, that's the girl.
Mhm.
That's who we want for the best friend. But Will was on the show, and there was a period when he and Miley and Emily, they're 7th grade. They're like 13, 14. And then we had done the show for a year. Then there was a break for months. Miley started to blossom into a young woman. And my son sprouted up and started working out for baseball. And suddenly he had shoulders. And when the show came back, he was on the set, and Miley came up to him like Mae West. And she was like, well, Will, you've certainly filled out. And he was like, I got to get out of here. And I was so grateful because I love Miley, but she would have eaten that kid alive. But Will went to Loyola Marymount University here in LA. He was a history major and loved history. And he had turned into a good writer, mostly, he says, because I made him rewrite papers in high school because his papers were lazy. He was really good in class, but his papers were lazy. So I would say, come on. On the one hand, on the other hand, you're repeating yourself here. This is filler. And it drove him crazy. But by the time he got to college, he said, I was a really good writer. Junior year, he takes a class as part of his minor. He was an English minor. And he took a class called Screenwriting for Non-Screenwriters. Basically, you watch movies, talked about movies, which he loved anyway. The final assignment, there was no exam, but you had to write like a 10 to 15 page short screenplay. Everybody in the class apparently wrote Ingmar Bergman kind of heavy. I was raped by my uncle. I was raped by my aunt. I was raped by my brother. I was raped by my dog. Just all this, He wrote basically something like three guys wind up three buddies wind up in Tijuana. Can't remember how they got there. They've lost their passports and they got to get back across the border. And I didn't know about this until the guy who runs the program at LMU used to be an old next door neighbor of ours. Called me up and he said, I just had dinner with the woman who teaches Will's class and she thinks he has real talent. And I was like, oh, crap. I don't want him to do this. But I read it and it was funny. And the dialogue sounded like people
Real.
talking. And the characters were different from each other. I said, this is better than stuff I read from people who make money at it. And then he said to me, I think I want to try it. And I was like, oh, crap. All right. And we sold one thing together. And he's writing stuff on his own. It's tough, though. It's tough right now. And
really tough.
Obviously, the pandemic didn't help. And even before that, I've always said, Gary and I started out, we were really lucky. But one of the reasons we were lucky is because when we started meeting people for writing jobs, we looked like the people who we wanted to hire us, right? We were white, we'd gone to college, we had the same comic references, we looked like their kids, they felt comfortable with us, and there were a lot of black and female writers who maybe were as good or better than us who couldn't get in the door.
Yeah.
Well, things have swung the other way now, and my kid is exactly the wrong combination of things.
Of everything.
Yeah, he's going to be a little bit more in the back of the line now.
Yeah.
And
it's true because I'm working at Warner
Yeah.
Brothers again, and it's quite amazing what's happening, and it probably should have happened 50, 60, 70 years
Exactly.
ago.
Exactly.
But there are a lot of women, a lot of blacks, a lot of Asians, a lot of minorities, everybody. Now when we were coming up, had to be, 80% of the writers were white males, maybe even 90% of the writers were.
And a fair number were Jewish.
Yes. Now it's proportionate.
It's proportionate.
And as it should be.
And most of me applauds it.
Yeah.
It's the way it should be.
Yep.
It just means my kid's going to have to work a little harder, but
if he's got talent, it'll come to the top.
I believe ultimately, if you're good and you keep pumping it out, there's room for everybody. I hope there is. I think there will be.
What's the title of his blog? How can our viewers find his blog?
It's called "What's in Will's Dumb Brain," and it's on what's the name? It's on hold on. This is I'm showing my age because I can't remember the name of the platform.
What's in Will's Dumb Brain?
What's in Will's Dumb Brain? Yeah, I read a few of the blogs.
Facebook.
The one on fast food and failure, I really like. Both of them. Really good.
I know. I'm watching him get better as he writes it too.
Well, if he wants to get better on our website, we can publish his blogs. So if he wants us to send us a blog or two,
I will have him.
We can post it on our website because
that'd be fantastic.
That's great. We'd love to have him.
No, that really I'm not. You don't have to pay me for today.
Okay, great. Well, we'll pay him the same amount for his blogs.
That's fantastic. As long as he'll take a check. Will he take a check from me? That's no problem. As long as he'll take a check.
That's great.
I also on your Twitter, you got writer and terrible guitarist. Obviously,
my God.
You're learning to play guitar though, aren't you? You got to be.
I stopped. I have to start again. I love guitar playing. I love good guitar. I love blues guitar. I love B.B. King and Stevie Ray Vaughan and Albert King and Eric Clapton and my favorite guitarist,
Tom Petty.
Oh, I love Tom. I miss Tom every day. I miss Tom Petty. Mike Campbell, his guitar is fabulous. But my favorite guitarist of all is Mark Knopfler from Dire Straits, who's had an extraordinary solo career as well. I find him unbelievably skilled and melodic and emotional. So I know what good guitar playing sounds like. I started playing basically after 60 years old. Well, your hand-eye coordination, you're not as fast. It takes forever to imprint on your brain. I played diligently for a year, and I thought, I'm never going to get anywhere, and I quit. And now I want to go back and start working on it again.
You know, doctors say that's the greatest thing you can do.
It's great for your brain.
Great, creates new synapses.
That's
it's the best thing you can do. Learn something new and exercise.
Yeah.
The two best things you can do.
And both of those things I do. And I do. I listen to music every day.
Well, I had a long history of like abusing drugs and alcohol. I mean, I was born in Ireland, William Patrick Michael O'Connor. It was almost an ethic responsibility to be a drunk. I owned a few bars. I was a bookmaker. I was a fireman in the Bronx and Harlem. So, I mean, it was always plenty of liquid, plenty of oil. And, plenty of oil. But I found that, when I went back to school at 68 when I graduated, I started doing stand-up, and my mind was missing, like things that I thought I could just grab, like, or when you reach for names that and you say, well, what's that guy's name again? And you say, Jesus, I used to know that,
We were talking about Jeopardy before.
Yeah.
5 years ago, I was like, Susan and Will were both saying, when are you going to apply? When are you going to apply? Now, there are nights when I knew it 5 minutes ago.
Yeah.
I'll know it 5 minutes from now. I don't know it now. It's in that file cabinet. I see the file cabinet in my mind. I can't unlock the file cabinet. It's right in there.
Yeah. But definitely, I would definitely go back if I was you. Keep playing the guitar. It doesn't make any difference. It doesn't make any difference whether you're any good. You ain't never going to be Tom Petty, but who is? Who is Tom Petty? And Tom Petty, by the way, is a Gainesville guy. He came from
Gainesville.
UF. Was a Gainesville guy. I like to do things in the present tense, Frank.
There, you got that over him. Hey, before we go, I want to get this in because we got a favorite episode of mine of Suddenly Susan.
Okay, I know which one it is.
I'm in the room, dear.
Still in the room.
Can you put up the photo of Brooke Shields as a young blonde? You know who she is?
I know who Brooke Shields is?
Yeah. So there's a picture of Steve and Gary with Brooke Shields,
Harvey Korman, and Tim Conway,
and Rosemary. So why don't you tell us about how that episode came about? There they are.
There it is.
And just keep the picture up.
This is one of the most fun episodes of television I've ever been involved in. I'm not sure where the first impetus came. It might have been our mutual friend, Greg Itzen.
Right.
Greg was in the same play in San Diego that Gary and I met doing. Greg Itzen, who played the evil president in the Kiefer Sutherland show 24. A wonderful actor. He had done a show with Harvey and was a golf buddy of Harvey's. And I played with him and Harvey out at Balboa or someplace. Anyway, I'm not sure where the initial impulse came from, but we came up with an idea for a show where Susan, played by Brooke, is walking on her way to work every day, walks by this old folks' home, and she sees this little man, sitting all alone, staring out the window, and he seems so sad, and she decides, I'm going to go make friends with him. And it's Tim Conway, who is incredibly bitter, mean, cranky, and he's bitter and mean because his brother stole the girl that he loved years ago and broke his heart, and he's never seen or spoken to his brother or the girl again. If you look at these three, it chronologically makes no sense at all. But we got Tim and we got Harvey to play the brother and Rosemary to play the woman. And of course, when she brings the brothers together, Tim discovers that Harvey's life with Rosemary has been a living hell for 30, 35, 40 years. And the three of them were, during the week, an absolute joy to work with, right?
I found every excuse to be on that stage every minute of it.
Wow, I
loved it. We loved it. And then when we were getting ready to film, I suddenly had this fear like, oh shit, our audience is younger. What if they don't recognize them? What if they don't know who they are? Tim came out for his first entrance. They went nuts. They killed in every scene. The audience loved it. There was one moment where Rosemary had to make an entrance. And she was in her little director's chair off set. And she looked to all the world like she was either dead or very deeply asleep. And the stage manager was like, Rosemary, you're on. And she bolted out of that chair like a racehorse from 0 to 60 and was on that stage not missing a beat. They were fabulous.
Pros.
They were absolutely fabulous. Every scene they were in. And man, what a treat to work with people that you grew up as a kid watching on TV.
Oh, that's got to be
laughing
some kick.
until you cried. Then the flip side of that would be the Tony Curtis episode.
Well, before we get to Tony Curtis, I want to say that probably 10 years ago, maybe 15 years after the shooting, I was at a birthday party for Don Rickles, and I was sitting right next to Harvey Korman, and I introduced myself, and I said, I'm Frank Pace, I produce Suddenly Susan. He goes, still in the room, dear. So why don't you tell about it? What was that line?
Oh, there was a line where Tim's in the room and Harvey and Rosemary, and Tim says something about how much he loved her, and basically she's saying that Harvey, Harvey's an idiot, he's a loser, this was the worst mistake I ever made in my life, he's pathetic, and Harvey goes, still in the room here.
Oh, it's great.
I love that line about you when turns out that the guy's life was a living hell. There's an old shot of an Irishman, I guess about 84, 85-year-old pensioner, and he's weeping in front of his gravestone. He's, why did you die? I was so happy. Why did you die? And two kids are walking past and they say, who is that? He goes, That's my wife's first husband. Why?
So now your Tony Curtis story.
Oh God, we came up with, I don't know, I think we may have been approached by his management or something, but we found out Tony was interested in doing a sitcom. I thought, wow, this is fabulous. And we had the wonderful Barbara Barry as Brooke's grandmother. And so we came up with a story where she meets this older gentleman and starts a romance late in life, only to discover when she goes shopping for clothes with Brooke that he's a cross-dresser. He comes out of the dressing room next to her, and it's, of course, an homage to Some Like It Hot. Tony comes to the set, and it becomes clear to us almost immediately that he spent a little bit too much time in Plato in the grotto at Hugh Hefner's.
At the Hugh Hefner's.
He can't remember. He can't get through a line. And we were going to film in front of an audience. So we realized by Tuesday, we're going to have to get this without an audience. We filmed him shot by shot. It was intensely difficult. And at one point, and I mean, I was a huge fan.
Of course.
And I, again, after years of acting, I always like, I can talk to actors. You know, a lot of people, a lot of writers can't, but I'm of the tribe. So I know how to talk to actors. So I went up to Tony. There was a scene where he comes over to apologize to Barbara after having been caught wearing the clothes, and he's trying to explain it's just this thing I do, whatever. And he was being, it was too easy. It was being too glib. So I said, Tony, when you get to the door and you see her, you're not exactly sure how you really feel more awkward. You don't know exactly how to say it. You don't know whether she'll accept the apology. A little bit more. And he said, you want me to pause? Yeah, I'd like you to pause. He said, how long do you want? Do you want a 1 pause? Do you want a 2 pause? Do you want a 3 pause? 2? All right, I'll give you a 2 pause. And I thought, oh, crap. This is a guy who, Some Like It Hot. I mean,
of course.
Jesus Christ, so good. And it's like, I'll give you a number 2.
Defiant one said.
Well,
and we called his agent afterward and said, you are not doing this guy any favors. Do not let him anywhere near.
Well, sitcoms, it reminds me of a line of Peter O'Toole had in My Favorite Year when he said, I'm not an actor, I'm a movie star.
That's
because in movies,
yeah,
you have to learn maybe 1 page of dialogue a day.
Right.
Maximum 2.
Right.
In a sitcom, you have to learn 45 pages of dialogue and deliver it at a moment's notice.
And then throw it out, and the next week, 45 new pages.
Yep.
Candace, and on Murphy, Diane believed in speeches. I mean, we had speeches for Candace that could be a page long. And for a long time, she memorized them all. And she made it look so easy, you didn't realize what it was taking out of her.
Oh, the effort must be remarkable. Did they do the cue cards? But she tried.
Finally, no. After a while, she said, I need help. And it was like, sure, okay, of course, why not? But up until for a while. And Gary and I wrote an episode, the episode where Miles worries that he might be gay, because he, also based on something that happened in the writer's room, a dream that one of the writers had. But it was the first episode in 3 years, maybe, in which Murphy was not in every scene of the show. She was that character was so predominant that Candace, most shows have an A and a B story.
Sure.
So you get a break. Candace was in every scene of every show for the first 2.5, 3 years. It's enormous. She worked her ass off.
She worked her ass off. She's one of the hardest working women I've ever met, and her success is very well earned.
Yeah.
No accident.
It's well earned. It's not deserved. It's well earned.
Yeah.
And even when we went back in 2018, she was incredibly prepared and incredibly gracious. And she's the delight of delights.
She's a pro. The crews loved her.
Yep.
She salty, funny, raunchy at times.
Yeah, she's everything you would not expect Candace Bergen to be.
Right.
She was like one of the guys.
She's like a Carol Lombard. She's a guy's gal.
Yeah. Billy would call him a dame.
A dame.
She's
great,
a real dame.
A great broad.
Best sense of the word. Exactly. Yeah.
There's a lot of pros in that picture. I gotta tell you that.
Yeah.
There's some real pros in that picture.
Yeah.
Well, to wrap this up, Derek, do you have any questions you want to add? Stephen, Billy, do you have any questions?
I got a couple questions. What's the industry has changed a lot, I'm sure, since you've started. What do you think like the top two biggest changes are? I know Netflix and the streaming services, but
there's two changes. One of them is good. One of them I don't think is quite as good. There's a lot more avenues for opportunities for writers and actors now. You can create something. Most agents don't know how, and a lot of execs don't know how to read a script, so they can't tell sometimes if it's funny. I remember an exec at Warner Brothers. We walked out of a table reading one day, and he said, "Boy, that went really well." I said, "Yeah, it's a good script." He said, "It's funny. I read it over the weekends, and sometimes I don't think it's funny, and then I hear it at the table on Monday, and it's really funny." And I thought, "Oh, that's interesting." And I walked away thinking, "Jesus Christ, this guy's a comedy VP."
Yeah.
So there's a lot more avenues. You can create something. You can create a 10-minute short or a 15-minute short as a writer, get your actor friends to do it, and somebody can see it, because an agent or an exec is much more likely to watch a 10 or 15-minute thing than they are to read a 45-page script. And they'll also be able to tell if it's funny. So that's a good thing. One of the things I think is not as good is I don't think people are brought up through the ranks the way we were to learn what makes a good script and what makes a good script better. I remember Diane cutting a joke of ours that I thought was really funny, and I said, "Well, that's a really funny joke." She said, "It is. It's a very funny joke, but it's a joke at the wrong time." And I was like, "I don't understand. Any joke that works is at the right," and she was like, "No, sometimes it hurts the build, it gets in the way.
Even a diamond interferes with the flow of the stream. Tell the story.
With the flow. And or it's the wrong kind of funny for this moment." I didn't understand that either. I think some people get launched really quick, and they don't have enough arrows in the quiver yet.
Right.
So that's a problem.
Yeah, and that was one of my questions was how come so much bad stuff gets made. So I guess that answers that question.
I think that is it. There's such a need for material.
Right.
I also know now from trying to sell stuff that power's being, even though there's a lot of avenues, power's being sort of concentrated in fewer and fewer big conglomerates. And there's more looking for the sure thing.
Right.
Yeah.
So that means I don't care how good this is, if it doesn't have a face attached to it, or if it doesn't come from somebody's book that's well known, you're much less likely to get original material. So you're getting a lot of stuff that is like the 8th version of Fast and Furious.
King Kong versus Godzilla is being made again. I mean
I've
Rocky 35.
How many times can I see Tokyo or New York or LA blown up? I still like a small character movie.
Yeah, I do too.
I'll tell you, Derek, I'll answer Stephen's question from my standpoint.
Yeah.
5 years ago, 10 years ago, we couldn't produce this show.
Right.
Because this podcast would cost $100,000 to do. Now we can do it with our cell phones.
Yeah.
And if, anytime a young person comes to me and says, "How do I get into the business?" I said, "Well, if you got a short, if you've got a movie, went to school, you've got friends, make your own movie." It's the old Andy Hardy. Let's get together and let's.
My dad's got a barn.
My dad's got a barn. You got talent. Let's put on a show.
Right.
Let's put on a show.
Yeah.
And you can edit it on your phone. You can score it on your phone. That's the quickest way to get into business.
I heard somebody say that the computing power in my phone is more sophisticated than what was in the rocket that Alan Shepard went up in.
Without a doubt.
Yes, and my good friend David Scott, who was the commander of Apollo 15, the first person to drive on the moon, he said exactly that. He said, our cell phones now have got 1,000 times more capability than the computers that put us on the moon.
Wow.
And there's more scientists alive today than ever lived. So God knows what's going to happen in the next 20 years.
It's going to be an interesting
I mean,
ride.
we've seen some changes in our lives. I mean, really, some.
My mom's 98.
Wow.
Yeah.
And as sharp as a tack. She wants to stay alive long enough to try and vote Ron Johnson out in Wisconsin.
Well, I'm all for.
Billy, any closing questions?
No, really, just that I really enjoyed talking to you, man. It was remarkable talking to you. And, you know, as a writer, or alleged writer anyway, I love to pick the brains of writers. And I'm delighted that your son's following.
I love being a writer. I love it. I love hanging out with writers. It's been one of the joys of my life. I had dinner with Russ Woody and Tom Palmer.
Oh, how are they doing?
They're doing great.
They were writers on the Murphy staff.
Writers on the Murphy staff. They become foxhole buddies. People that you did a show with are your war buddies. And you know about each other's families. You know each other's histories.
Well, you're with them like 40 or 50 hours a week,
You're with them more than you're with your
that.
family.
More than 40 or 50 hours.
Yeah.
60 to 70 hours.
Yeah.
Well, Stephen, thank you so much.
Oh, you've
it's
been a blast.
You've been a delight.
You guys did great research, and some of these photos I haven't seen. I never saw the Happy Days thing.
Yeah. Well,
we got a Brett Favre dick pic we could put up for you too if you want.
See, only if he's wearing the Crocs.
Little Brett, I think he called it.
Well, thank you so much for being here. You've been a terrific guest, and I'll look forward to seeing you and Susan soon.
Sounds great.
All right.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, Derek.
Pretty good guest, huh, pal?
Oh, yeah, he was interesting as hell, man. Real interesting guy. And again, back to what you said, what we said in the lips, is what I got from you, is being flexible. I mean, guy started out as an actor and ended up as a writer, and then as an executive producer.
Yeah, most actors who have some success younger in life realize they are not going to be able to make a living as an actor forever. So they start writing, they start directing, and that's how you have so many actors become directors.
Throw more pans in the fire. I told you the story about Steve Buscemi when he was a fireman in Manhattan. The captain told him, Steve, you're not that good looking, and you're leaving a good job. You should really reconsider this. And, you got to, like you said, you got to stay alive. Well, Pepe, when we had Pepe Castro on, it's the same thing. I mean, he wrote jingles. You do whatever you got to do to stay alive, to keep, and you're still working. You're doing what you love to do.
It's like Larry Wilmore told me once, it's about alternate sources of income. You have to get all kinds of alternate sources of income.
Streams of income.
Streams of income.
Yeah, that makes sense, which I've never been able to do. I've had streams of outcome.
you can spend it as quick as you get it.
I got tons of streams of outcome. The income thing is a problem. There's a great line in Dickens, David Copperfield, where McCall is telling David Copperfield, young Mr. Copperfield, there's expenditures and there's income. And, if your expenditures outdo your income, you've got problems, and that's been a problem all my life, right?
Yeah. I had a college professor once whose philosophy on life was, he says, you make a little, you wait till the pile goes up, and then you spend it all.
That's not a bad philosophy.
And then you make it up again, and then you spend it all. Yeah. And he died broke.
Yeah,
but you know what? Is that a bad way to die? Broke? I don't know.
It is a bad way to die.
You think so? Why? You come into the world screaming, naked and broke. Why not go out the same way?
Because you should be able to make something of your life in the time in between.
But is economics the measure of what you've accomplished in life?
No, but you can't
time your death is the real issue. You know what I mean? It's like you can't time when you run out of the money. That's the problem.
No, without a doubt. Yeah, I get that.
Well, you can.
If you've been broke all your life,
you can time it.
That's true.
You could jump off the bridge because you haven't had money for so long. I'm going to end it all.
You could.
I got to tell you the story, my Tony Curtis story, and Stephen said it on the way out the door. But the way I heard the story was that Bertie Schwartz, Tony Curtis, was roommates with Walter Matthau. Right. When they both came to New York, and both of them, of course, were struggling actors, so they were roommates. But of course, with the Bronx tradition and New York tradition of breaking each other's balls, Curtis made it big with Some Like It Hot. Of course, that was his big breakthrough role. And he was in the back of a limousine driving by Penn Station, and Walter Matthau was trying to hail a cab, and it was pouring rain. I mean, pissing out of the heavens, rain. And Tony Curtis sees Walter Matthau, and he tells the chauffeur, pull over, there's my friend Walter. And he puts down the window, he goes, Walter. And Walter Matthau goes, Tony, thank God. He goes, I can't get a cab. He goes, I just fucked Marilyn Monroe. He puts the window up and pulls off. Which is like typical Bronx, typical New York.
You know what? I'm not going to do anything else I had planned. Say goodnight. Bill.
Say goodnight. I didn't fuck Marilyn Monroe. It was Bernie Schwartz.
Say goodnight,
Good night. Thanks for looking in. Don't forget, if these lips could talk, keep an eye out for Lamar's Gamble.
Yeah, well, Lamar's Gamble is going to be out really soon. It may already be out.
Yeah, well, I'm looking
forward.
forward.
Check the mailbox today.
Yeah, well, that's it. Let's hope we got a copy of it.
Yeah.
I know a guy if you need one.
Okay. Good night, Derek.
Good night,
Good night,
Derek.
everybody.
Good night, America.
Next week's
Good night.
guest, former professional baseball player Doug Flynn.
We'll see you next week.